All right. Thank you, Alejandra. I assume that's my cue to go ahead and get started. So let's dive into the content for this presentation. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome to this tech talk on accelerating AI agent development for Dynamics 365 ERP, which is focused on the work that we're doing on the Agent Foundation to enable the development of AI agentic experiences for Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations apps. In this session, we're going to talk about some of the tools that we're building that enable those experiences, both for our first-party application teams at Microsoft and the things that we're building, but primarily focused on the things that you can do in your environments to build the AI experiences that are needed for your organizations. So looking at our ecosystem that we're building out with Copilot and agents for finance and operations apps, we have lots of first-party agents that Microsoft, our application teams, are building for enabling AI experiences in your F&O environments. These are Dynamics 365, both copilots for chat experiences and agents that are working autonomously in the background to enable experiences that streamline your operations. But we know that Microsoft isn't going to be building all of the experiences that are needed for your organization. There need to be tools available for you in your environments to be able to build out additional experiences and really rapidly grow the number of AI agentic experiences that are available to you that can be tailored to the specific needs of your organization. So these are the copilots and the extensions to your agents and copilots that are focused on your business data, your apps, your workflows, your automations, the things that are specific to your organizations, because every organization is different. So a focus for us on our application teams for finance and operations apps is to enable those experiences with an agentic foundation that gives you the tool set to create those extensions and customizations for your environment. Looking at that from a strategic perspective, if you've seen any of our strategy presentations over the last couple of years, you've probably seen a slide similar to this. The good news is that our strategy isn't changing. The tool sets are changing, and we'll talk through some of the changes in the tool sets that are available, but overall, our strategy has maintained consistent in our agentic ERP experiences that we're building. In this foundation, at the top, we have our Copilot adaptive experience. It's really defining those new interaction patterns that are needed between you and the applications that you have with those copilots and how you interact with autonomous agents to make sure that you have the tool set available for you, or the user experience available for you to interact with those autonomous agents and make sure that there's a human in the loop for those experiences. So that's the user experience in the applications that defines that interaction pattern. The layer below that is our ERP agent foundation, primarily powered by Copilot Studio. This is where we're taking advantage of those large language models that have really revolutionized how we do business over the last few years. That drive that intelligent agentic orchestration and manage that stochastic reasoning within that agent foundation. We have a large language model that takes a lot of inputs, understands context, can make decisions, can do reasoning, and then makes decisions based on all that information that's granted to it. Where F&O code, this headless business services layer contributes to this agentic foundation, is that we know within all of that stochastic reasoning and that intelligent AI orchestration, there's still very deterministic business processes that exist within the organization. And those continue to need to be, will always need to be deterministic. These are things that are defined in code. These are and often defined in law, like the calculation for depreciation, your customer balances, your financial statements. All of that is very deterministic in how those calculations need to be done. And if we think about what a large language model is and how it's driving that intelligent orchestration in our ERP foundation, a large language model is very good at language. It's very good at reasoning. It's very good at a lot of things, but it doesn't natively do calculations, and it doesn't natively understand a lot of that business logic. So this is where our agent foundation needs to work together with the billions of lines of code within our code base and all the extensions that have been added to the F&O code base and X++. All of that very deterministic business logic that's been building up for decades and is very rich business logic can contribute to this by having these two layers work together with a a layer that understands stochastic reasoning and intelligence that can work together with the very deterministic business code of all of these business applications that can work together to provide those agentic experiences. So if we look at our agent ecosystem, uh, this is core to the strategy that as we build out these agentic experiences of our agent foundation working with the business logic of the applications, we know that we need to have that tool set enabled for those layers to communicate with each other. Our first-party applications, these are our Microsoft application, agentic experiences agents. These are things that have been announced, like the supplier communications agent and our time and expense agent. The account reconciliation agent. These are agents that Microsoft is building and are released to be taken up by customers. But as we discussed earlier, that this isn't the bulk of the experiences that we expect that you'll have in your environment as we continue to grow the number of agents that are available for you in your environment. We have third-party partners, ISVs that are building out new experiences and VARs that are building out experiences that are available for customers. And we also expect that this tool set that we're building will enable you to build custom experiences in your environment using Copilot Studio and other agent frameworks. So all of these working together give you that tool set to build the right experiences that you'll need within your own environment. How we're doing this, we're enabling this primarily with Model Context Protocol. And this is what has changed over the last year with our strategy is the technology or the protocol that we're using to enable these experiences. Model Context Protocol is relatively new. It was developed by Anthropic. It's not a Microsoft protocol, but Microsoft is rapidly adopting this across all of our agent experiences to make sure that we are adopting industry standards for communication between agents and our backend systems. So it's a standard protocol that really defines how an agent system communicates with the applications. We're able to build servers, MCP servers, Model Context Protocol servers that surface the tools, the data and business logic available within those applications to agent frameworks so that the agents are able to effectively communicate with the data and business logic of those applications. What does that look like from a high-level architectural perspective? When we look at that from the agent, it looks like I need to change a logo here, but Copilot Studio changed our branding, and I still haven't changed the logo on this slide. But this is Copilot Studio. This is our primary agent framework where we're building that intelligent orchestration for an agentic experience. It's driven by large language models that manage the intelligent orchestration, deciding what tools to call, what operations need to happen, and when they need to happen. We also give it natural language instructions that define general reasoning rules on how that agent should work, and then give it a list of tools. The tools are the things that agent knows how to do. These would be things like calculating a customer balance or creating a sales order, or just general operations that the agent is able to do and knows how to do. This is the list of those things with natural language descriptions so that the LLM, when given inputs, can orchestrate across these tools to determine what it needs to do and when. But the logic doesn't sit in the agent itself. The operation and the business logic and data for that operation are still sitting in our backend system. And within that agentic framework and that foundation, this is where our business code contributes to the overall agentic framework by enabling that business logic that when a tool is called, it calls back into the backend system to retrieve that knowledge, run the code, perform the action, gather the knowledge based on data, and return that back to the agent as context so it can continue the operation. And then return as outputs for that agent. Where Model Context Protocol comes into this is we have our MCP servers that broker that communication between the two platforms, that this becomes a standard protocol that really dramatically simplifies the agentic building experience, development experience, by streamlining the communication pattern. So it really just becomes a natural language development process where you're defining in natural language your intent for that agent. And the tool set available within that Model Context Protocol server then manages the communication and understands how to perform that operation in the backend system and return a response back. The two servers that we have available, and actually three, we support Dataverse as well, but the two that we have highlighted here on the slide are Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server that manages direct communication with the data and business logic of our application in finance and operations apps, and analytics. The analytics server is surfaces BPA, the business performance analytics application queries that are the manage the dimensional analytical models that are available for all of your finance and operations apps, opening up that information and all of those queries to an analytical server so that we can run queries on top of that information. So why Model Context Protocol? Primarily, what we're looking for with Model Context Protocol server is really streamlining that experience for developing agents and extending agents for finance and operations apps. Now, with our servers, we can, in natural language, communicate with the data and business logic of the application, the analytics of the applications, by writing natural language statements. And we'll look at demos about how that can be lit up. It's also a standard protocol, a single standard protocol. It's being rapidly adopted across the industry, enabling us to surface the server not just to Copilot Studio, but opens it up for other agent platforms to communicate with F&O. So it's broadening the ecosystem by standardizing on that single protocol. And something to call out, this bottom point here, the no hard coding. If you've seen our presentations over the last couple of years, as we've been highlighting how we can open up agentic experiences for F&O, there have been a lot of exciting developments, and over the last couple of years, we've opened up possibilities that your agents could do anything in F&O. All you had to do was write some X++. And that's not the end experience that we want. So by opening up Model Context Protocol as a server, we're removing that requirement and opening up the data and business logic of the application without the need to write specialized custom APIs that execute X++. So you don't have to go in and write new classes to open up opportunities and operations for your agents to call back into our backend system. When we look at the agentic experiences that we're building, one thing that we want to highlight are the types of experiences that this opens up when we're building these agentic experiences. What is it that large language models are really good at? And the goal of this is to say that the MCP servers are really exciting to play around with. They're often mind-blowing in the experiences that you can start building, but this isn't a toy. It's not something that we open up and chat with and have it write a poem for us and close at the end of the day. This is something where we're revolutionizing ERP. So I want to highlight the things that LLMs, large language models, are really good at and can help really revolutionize the way that we do business in your organizations by building these experiences that can be deployed in your environment and start working with them today. So things that LLMs are great at. First one is automation. We're trying to build processes that can automate things that humans today have to just click through the application and spend a lot of time in drudgery of manual work. But when I say automation, one thing I want to highlight is that we are not focused on automation alone. This isn't something where we are taking an LLM and attaching it to something that could have been done with a Power Automate flow or by writing some code. This is extending automation to things that we couldn't do before. If you're building automations that could be done by removing the LLM and just doing it as a Power Automate flow, then we're not taking full advantage of the really power of a large language model in automating things that can take advantage of other areas. So let's look at the next three that highlight some of those capabilities. LLMs are really good at language. It's right in the name, large language model. And the way the large language models work is they've been trained on essentially the entire internet, trained on books, trained on language to understand language. So that when you feed in context, that is natural language, it's able to understand that context, run it through a model, tokenize a few of the words, and then predict an output response. These are all probabilistic models, so they're predicting what the response should be based on all the information that it's been given. And they are really good at understanding that language. And they keep getting better and better at understanding language and responding in natural language. So that natural language communication is a really valuable component that we can take advantage of in building these agentic experiences. For example, the supplier communication agent from Microsoft is one example of that. When you receive an email from a vendor that gives you some update on a status of an order, for example, rather than having a human have to read that email and then determine what needs to happen in the system based on that, large language models can read that email, process that email, determine the intent of that email, pull out specific objects from the email that are referencing objects in our backend system, and then perform operations in the backend system based on understanding of that language that's coming in from the email. So we're removing that requirement that a human sit and read email all day because LLMs are really good at understanding that language. So it opens up opportunities there that we can use as scenarios for building agents in our environments. Another one is taking unstructured data and converting it into structured data. This is something that isn't new with LLMs, but it's something that LLMs do very well. OCR, optical character recognition, has been good at doing this for a while, but LLMs bring this into an agentic experience that really enhance the capabilities. That, for example, we could feed in a candidate resume and have that convert it into a candidate record by looking at a PDF, pulling out the requisite information, converting it into structured data, and then creating a record. Or a sales order, or looking at a scanned receipt, that's a picture of a receipt, and being able to parse that out and turn that into structured data that we can then work with within our agent. LLMs are really good at those experiences. And the last one I want to highlight is reasoning. That LLMs are really good at reasoning in ways that a human might also reason. And if we give it enough context about a scenario, about the situation, it's able to look at all of that language and make decisions that are intelligently orchestrated, but using that large language model. We'll look at a couple of scenarios, diving into demos that highlight the reasoning capabilities of agents and large language models that can really streamline how you operate within your organization. All right, just a couple more slides before we dive into demos. So in May, for Build, we announced our first iteration of the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server. And in May, the tool set available within that server had 13 static tools. These were curated tools that were very specific for high-value operations that were focused on a very specific end-to-end scenario within F&O. So if you look down this, you can kind of see that this is focused on a requisition workflow, working through purchase orders and understanding that scenario so that we can automate some of those processes. But the challenge that we have is that we had to write code for each of these individual operations. And we know that F&O does hundreds of thousands of things. And to scale, to open up agents to be able to work with the entire application, we're not able to. Well, writing code for every individual operation that we want to perform isn't going to scale to the level that we need it to work for our customer environments. So in our second iteration that we just announced the public preview 2 weeks ago in early November, we're taking a different approach by looking at a different level of abstraction with our tool set. That we are opening up the opportunity for an agent to work with the application like a human would work with the application. Giving it a list of about 20 tools. We're adding a couple more and refining this list as we go. But with about 20 tools, we're giving the agent the list of things that it needs to work through the application as a human would. So if we ask it to, for example, look up a customer balance, rather than rather than having to write code specifically that surfaces that information and calling that code, we can have the agent find the customer form, open the customer form, click calculate customer balance, and return that response back. So with this list of 20 tools, we're moving from our May 2025 release that had 13 actions and opening that up to a dynamic ERP MCP server that enables well over 500,000 operations, opening up essentially the entire application to be able to have agents interact with that business functionality, opening up the data and business logic of the applications. So the key point is that an agent can do almost, there are a few exceptions that are documented in our public documentation, but almost anything that a human with that same security role can do in the ERP. And that's the next slide, is focused on security. This always comes up in our conversations, is security. And it's a very valid and significant concern that everything must be bound by security. MCP, as a protocol, supports enterprise-grade authentication and authorization, and this is something that we have ensured is built into our MCP server, that any operations that go through the MCP server are bound by F&O security roles, duties, and privileges. So your identity in which in the context, security context in which your agent is running, that user, whether it's an autonomous agent that has an identity assigned to the agent, or whether it's running on behalf of a user in a chat copilot experience, whatever authenticated identity is passed to F&O must be assigned to roles, duties, and privileges. And we will only surface the view model to the application, view model to the agent that is granted by security. And any operations that the agent tries to perform are also bound by those same roles, duties, and privileges. So this goes through several rounds of security reviews and analyses and threat models to ensure that we are not breaking any security rules, and no agent is able to perform an operation that it shouldn't be able to based on the security granted to it within the application. All right, with that setup and context, let's dive in and look at how some demos about how this works. So I am going to start in the application, and with this first demo, I'm also going to highlight some of the enhancements to our sidecar chat panel, while we're also talking about Model Context Protocol. So in our application, we have the sidecar chat copilot that provides very customizable contextual guidance for you as you're working throughout the flow of your application. One of the real benefits of this sidecar chat is that it's extremely customizable and extensible. That out of box, there has a few capabilities that you can ask questions about application functionality, and it will go and do RAG across our public documentation and return a response back to you. So out of box, it doesn't have a lot of capabilities, but it has the ability for you to go customize this experience so that it can become what you need it to be for your organization. So in this case, for this demo, I've added a few custom actions for sales order flow that give additional capabilities for the users that I would need in my organization. But the two enhancements that I want to highlight that are recent to the sidecar chat, first is this zero prompt experience. This is customizable and contextual, so it understands the context of the forum that I'm on, and I can have specific pre-formed prompts that are available as options for users to select as a starting experience within the application based on the forum or context that they're on. So in this case, for my sales orders, I have a few prompts here that I have curated previously, and it understands not only the form that I'm on, but also the record that I'm looking at. So if I refresh, you see it changed to 860 as the record that I'm looking at. It knows the record I'm on and can form those form prompts related to that. So it's very contextual in guiding me through the context of the application. So in this case, what I first want to do is I want to create a new order. And when I click that, you see that down here in the bottom, we've automatically populated with my prompt, convert this attachment to a new order. And the second recent addition to this chat panel is the ability to attach records and bring attachments into the context of my chat experience. So I could take a screenshot of the application that shows that context, or I can browse and select a file, and I will take a customer order, bring that into the context of my application, and then run that. So what this is doing now is it is taking my PDF of my customer order, it's parsing through that information using generative help, using a custom generative action that I have developed on the back end that's processing this PDF, and then creating that as a record in my backend system. Once this record is created, we can then start working with the record directly in the application and start performing some of the other operations here. All right, so it's finished. In my action, I've also added a hyperlink so I could hyperlink to that record. But in this case, I want to just refresh and show that it is now a new record that's coming up on my list of sales orders. So I have 000936 as a new record that's available for me to start working with. And we see that from my PDF, it did bring in my line items correctly. It brought in I had two line items in that PDF, and it's brought those in as expected. So the next phase of this, just highlighting some of the other capabilities here. For this scenario, this is a high priority customer for me. And I want to make sure that I have physical on-hand inventory available for me to fulfill this order as quickly as possible. But if I open this reservation panel and look at the reservations, I see that all of my physical on-hand inventory is already reserved, and I don't have enough available for me to fulfill this order. So I want to look and see if there are others. So I'm going to find alternate reservations. This will look and see if there are other orders that have reserved inventory for this item that I can borrow from. So in this case, I see that I have Contoso Retail San Diego has a whole bunch reserved for this item, and this saves me a huge amount of clicks. Typically, I would have to navigate out, and I'd have to look through the application and find, click through looking for other orders that have this. But instead, I'm just going to use it as an action that goes and looks for that information for me and returns it right back to me. And I see that 860 has a bunch of reserved inventory that I can borrow from to break this reservation. So I now need to break that reservation and bring that over as so I can reserve it for this item. In this case, I have a break reservation action, and I want to break it for order 860 for item 4200. And on that order, I'm going to set it to 250. So I'm going to borrow 200 so I have a little bit of a buffer and submit that. Something to note here is that this sidecar chat, as you're building out your custom experiences, we fully support adaptive cards in this so that you can have cleaner experiences and really build out the experience that you're looking for. It's customized to what works best for users in your organization. So when I submit this action, this is where we're bringing Model Context Protocol into this flow. Right now, when I submit that, this is calling a custom action. It's actually a sub-agent of this sidecar chat that is driven by Model Context Protocol. There isn't a break reservation entity or even an entity that surfaces reserved inventory for this, that the agent can perform this operation directly. So I'm using the Model Context Protocol server to step-by-step work through the application for this order number, opening up the reservation, changing the number for that reservation and returning a response back to me, so having performed that operation. And then it says the reservation for item on this order is now reserved as a quantity of 250. So I should be able to refresh this and see my physical reserved has now 200 more, and I now have inventory available for me to reserve this lot, and I can then continue on. So really the value here is the context of the application where I don't have to navigate away from the document I'm working on to perform all these other operations or open up other browser windows. I have a guide with me, a co-pilot that's working with me alongside the context of my application to perform these operations enabled by Model Context Protocol and other custom actions. So that is one scenario that really highlights capabilities of in-context application. So let's look at a couple of others. Let's jump out to Visual Studio Code. This is a quick demo to highlight the capabilities of the BPA, the Dynamics 365 ERP Analytics MCP server. That within this opens up the dimensional analytical models over your F&O data to bring back information. So in this case, I want to be able to run a query that gets me profit and loss information. So if I say create a monthly, I want it to include charts, so I'm going to say including charts, and I want to output the results as an HTML file. And that if it when its output is HTML, we can then view that in a browser, and it gives us that gives us the format that we're looking for. As LLMs are also really good at writing code, so they're great at Python, great at writing other code, also good at HTML. So if we tell it to write the output as an HTML file, it then outputs in the format that we ask for. So when it's running this MCP server, what it will do is first, based on my prompt, I asked for P&L information. It's going to look through the available queries and models to find the right model for profit and loss. It finds the right model and then executes that the selected query to begin processing that information. One of the reasons that I'm running this in Visual Studio Code is to highlight that we support multiple clients with our Model Context Protocol server. This is a remote MCP server. It's available on the AOS that can be connected to from Copilot Studio. It can be connected to from Visual Studio, like OpenAI or Claude. So any platform that supports the MCP server will be able to connect to this and be able to communicate with the data and business logic of the application. So we're looking at this, we're watching it. It went and found all the information that it was looking for, and now it's writing all the code or markup for us to surface that report as we have defined it. Another thing to note is that I didn't give it a lot of detail on how to style this report. I left all those decisions to the agent to make all those style decisions to determine which charts to form. You can be more specific in your prompt if there is specific information and formatting that you want. That's a key point throughout all these demos, that I keep my prompts very simple. I'm not giving it a ton of detail, but you can be more structured and detailed in the prompts if there is more detail and definition that you want around the experiences that you're looking for. And as it's building this out, I'm seeing that it's looking like this is going to be slightly different than the last time I ran this. So if you are not specific in the formatting and charts that you're looking for, you will get slightly different results each time you run it. So it's an interesting learning as you play around with these experiences, that prompt engineering and context engineering is important if there are specific experiences that you're looking for. All right, so we have our HTML output. I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top here. Create a new file. And open in a browser, and we see this is the output that it gave me, based on the format that it determined that I needed. That it found my total revenue, my expenses, my net profit, gave me a trended chart based on what I was asking for, gave me my revenue and expenses, my trend analysis, various charts that it determined that I needed based on the prompt that I gave to it. So able to look at all of that rich data and the dimensional models that we have and pull out information that we're looking for. The next demo that we will look at is looking at the F&O MCP server, the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server that communicates directly with the data and business logic of the applications. In this case, just to show, and one thing to note is that we can publish this to Teams or our website or Copilot for M365. I'm doing this in Copilot Studio so that we can watch the activity map as it's running, and we can see how it's reasoning and how it's thinking as it works through the application. So in this case, what I want is a customer risk analysis report. F&O doesn't have a customer risk analysis report, so I'm going to give it a prompt and ask it to go find the information and do some reasoning for me. So we'll say, help me create a customer and I'll tell it what kind of information to consider. Consider information like the customer's balance, aging balance. We want to look at their aging information. Let's say credit limit, credit score, and then we'll just say any So I'll give it just kind of a general statement. So there is no, in our finance and operations apps, we don't have a risk analysis report. So I'm giving it a fairly simple prompt, giving it general guidance on what information to look for. And then this is going to use those 20 tools to go find that information in the application and then do some reasoning across that information. And this is where we see the reasoning capabilities of these of the large language model, that it can find that data that I asked for by finding a menu item, opening the menu item, looking for the specific detail on that form that it thinks it needs to fulfill out that risk analysis report, and then bringing that into the context so that it can reason across that context and then form a report for me. So while this is thinking, and it's interesting to watch the reasoning as it goes. For the model of this agent, in particular, the model that I'm using is Claude Anthropic Sonnet 4.5, which is one of the more recent reasoning models that provides capabilities over the data and business logic of the applications. And Sonnet 4.5 is actually the recommended model for use with the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server. Especially in Copilot Studio, that's where we're seeing the most consistent results. You can use other models, but GPT-5 and Sonnet 4.5 are the two that have been shown to provide the most consistent results in reasoning over this data. So we're watching this reasoning. It's looking for that information. It's finding the balance and net information. It's going to form a report here in a minute. But while it's continuing to work through this information, it looks like it found the balance, it found the credit limit, finding additional information. Let's quickly jump over and just look at the development experience for how I built this agent. And then we'll hop back here and see end result. For developing this agent, it was fairly quick. I created a shell, just a base agent in Copilot Studio, which is a few clicks, and then added the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP server to the agent. You can do this by adding a tool, clicking Model Context Protocol, and then you're looking for the Dynamics 365 ERP MCP preview server. This is the new Dynamic MCP server. Click that and adding configure. I won't add because I've already added it. But once you click this, it's a couple more clicks to add it, and then you have all of those 20 actions available that it then becomes something that the agent knows how to have those interactions with the F&O MCP server. The only other piece that I added to this agent, I selected Claude Sonnet as my model, and then for my instructions, I gave it just general instructions on how to work with that tool set. This is a generic set of instructions that I copied and pasted from our public documentation. In our public docs, we have the short list that just gives general instructions on how to work with those tools. Copy and paste it in here, save, and go. And you can start working with those tools. You may find that with your agent experiences, you need to provide some custom guidance and additional instructions, but this gives you a good starting point for building those agents and understanding how to work with the application. So let's look and see in our activity. Looks like it has all the information that it needs, and now it's doing reasoning over all of that data to form the report and surface that information back to me. And notice, oh, there we go. So then forms a well-formatted report giving me all the information that it has based on reasoning and decision with the information that it found. So found the customer information, found that it's been a customer for 15 plus years. We have a good long-standing relationship with this customer, provides recommendations. All of my demo data is in 2017, so this is going to see it as a high-risk customer because we have everything is way overdue. So it says this is critical. It forms decisions and recommendations based on this, giving me risk factors and guidance with conclusions, outputting that information. So a lot of good detail based on a fairly simple prompt that I gave to the agent asking for a risk analysis. It does pretty well in going in and finding that information, using the MCP server to go find the right data, return that data to the application, and then make decisions based on that and recommendations to me as the human user. One other thing to note is that it's not just going in and finding data. One of the values of this MCP server is that when it goes in and finds the information, when it's clicking through the application, it is being surfaced the view model of the application that provides all of the data and operations that can be performed for that user's security role. So any buttons that can be clicked that can execute business logic, along with any data that's being shown on that form. So for example, the customer balance that it found of 128,000 that's past due, this is a runtime calculation. It's not something that we could just go do a get query over an OData entity to pull this back. It's something that is enabled by being able to open up the application, click a button that executes code, does that calculation, and returns that response back, making it available to the agent. Another valuable component of this model, where we are taking the view model of the application and surfacing it to the agent, is that it also includes all extensions and customizations, personalizations that are available in that environment. So if you have ISV extensions in the environment, they are automatically included in the view model as long as security is granted to the user to see that information. So the way that this operates is it's similar conceptually to a computer use agent. If you've seen Copilot Studio computer use agents, where it looks at an open client application, takes a snapshot of what it sees on the screen, makes reasons over that screenshot, and then performs the next action, and it's a series of screenshots. Conceptually, it's similar to that, but we're doing it without the need to spin up a client session. We're doing it through server APIs that rather than open up a client session, take a screenshot of it, we are taking the view model that would be rendered by a client, and rather than sending it to the application client, we're sending it as metadata through a server API to the agent to be used as context. And it will only include the view model that is available to that user security role. Once the view model is given to it as context, it is then able to perform, see all those operations that are available, see all the data that's available, and then perform the next action that's available to it based on the natural language labels of the metadata in that view model. Performing those operations through backend server APIs. All right, one more demo that we have here. And the last demo that we have to highlight this capability is highlighting a couple of different things. The first one is that it will reason. It shows the reasoning capabilities of a large language model, that we give it context and then ask the agent to make a decision based on context that is given to it. The other component is a pattern that is important as we build out autonomous agents for Dynamics 365 ERP, that we often in many scenarios, we don't want to just create an autonomous agent that runs asynchronously on its own without any oversight. So in this case, what I have done is I've taken an agent in a scenario and I've added it as part of a workflow so that humans can submit to the workflow that assigns a task to an agent, and then there is a human reviewer afterwards of that workflow using Dynamics 365 F&O, the F&O workflow framework. So in this scenario, what we are looking at is using an agent to select a supplier for a purchase requisition. So within an organization, you have purchase requisitions. We need to buy things that will be used in our organization, either as supplies or items within production, whatever you're using those for. We have purchase requisition capabilities that are a requester can request an item, and then someone has to decide the right supplier from which we should purchase that item. Um, and that's not often a deterministic decision on which supplier is best for that context. It's not always the lowest price vendor that we select. Because there is other context that often needs to be considered. Sometimes we want the lowest price. Sometimes we want to consider vendor performance. Sometimes we want to see if, like, is it critical that it be delivered on time? Do we care about on time in full analysis of that supplier? Is there other information that needs to be considered? And then it's stochastic reasoning that a human typically does to say, for this situation, this supplier is needed to fulfill this in the way that we need it. We can now use the intelligent orchestration and reasoning of an agent to fulfill that decision-making process by giving it context, giving it some guidelines on how to make decisions, and then letting it make those decisions. So let's jump in and look at what that looks like for a purchase requisition. In this case, Charlie Carson has previously submitted a purchase requisition, and within the workflow, when Charlie submitted this requisition, well, when I submitted this requisition, I added a comment in the workflow to say it is absolutely critical that this be delivered on time for us to meet our production deadlines. So it's a fairly simple comment that is added in the workflow that can then be considered by the agent in understanding supplier decision. So I need to buy item 4200, some printed circuit boards. I need 50 of them. And right now I don't have a vendor selected. I've submitted that to workflow, and it's currently pending because when this was submitted to workflow, within that workflow, rather than assigning a work item to a human, I have assigned that work item to an agent. And the agent will then make those decisions and continue on with the workflow of deciding this vendor account. So this would typically be an autonomous process that's triggered automatically. But in this case, I want to trigger it manually so that we can watch the reasoning as it works through this. I have my Contoso requisitions agent, given it some instructions. I've selected my model, and I will trigger it by the triggering activity of the workflow item being submitted to workflow. That is a business event in our F&O workflow, F&O business events framework, triggers the operation, and then kicks off this process. We can see the reasoning that happens as it's working through this. So first thing you saw, I also have an email MCP server here that is reasoned over as part of this operation, because at the end of this process, I want an email to be sent to the next person in the workflow explaining the reasoning that was done. So an email is part of that. It gets triggered and considered in the orchestration. The next step is it starts working through this orchestration of working step by step through this process to find the data and business logic and perform the operations that I have asked it to do. And we can see all of this context is what's being considered when it kicks off this workflow. So this is a little hard to read. Let's jump over to, as this is working through the reasoning, we'll jump back to this in a minute, but let's jump over and see what is the trigger, the prompt that has been added on this trigger to enable this experience. So within the triggering mechanism, when that event happens, when that requisition is submitted to workflow, this is what I want it to do. And it becomes just a simple natural language statement for directing the agent what it should be doing. It can take that context from my natural language statements and reason over it, and then perform the operations over the Model Context Protocol server. So first thing I asked it to do is, from the payload of that business event, go find the item ID that we're working with, because this is a line item workflow. It's looking at each line individually, performing the operation, find the item for that line item. Then open the released product details, and first find the trade agreements, because we do want to find lowest price. That's the first thing we want to do, is see who is the cheapest based on our approved vendors, for our approved vendors, who is the cheapest of those, so that we can find the lowest price. But then we give it some guidance, and I've kept this, for this example, very simple. You could expand this out to give it a lot more context on things that it should reason over. But in my case, I've given it a few statements of things that it should think about in making a decision based on the data and context that it has. So find the lowest price, find the account selection value, and also look at the on time in full analysis and look at the comments. So the comment that was added of it is absolutely critical that it be delivered on time, that is passed as input that it can consider in this context. And I just noticed I have a spelling mistake in here. So it's going to reason over this as to make its decision on which supplier it picks. Once it selects that supplier, then I want it to update the requisition and continue to the next step of the workflow. So open the requisition, find the requisition number, update the vendor and warehouse on that requisition item, and then complete the workflow. I want it to select the complete action, and that will then say, I'm done. Move on to the next step in the workflow, which is a human reviewer that will see all of that context, see the complete information, then can review and approve the operation that was done by that autonomous agent. And send an email to that. I've hard-coded this. You could put this in as a variable based on your whoever the next person is, but in this case, I've just hard-coded it to send it to me. And we can look at that process. So let's jump back to our agent and see how it's doing in reasoning. So we see that it's, if you're using Sonnet 4.5, it gives you commentary as it's reasoning through it. So you see things like, perfect, I found the right item, as it's working through us. So it says the form has been saved. So it looks like it found the right, found a vendor. It selected vendor 1001. With that unit price for total price, it updated the record. The workflow dialog is open. It sees that it can complete the requisition line. It sees that there is a complete button on that form based on the view model that's given to it. It has access to that action and can perform that action. And then is explaining the reasoning. It's adding I asked it to add the reasoning both to an email that is being sent to the approver and also add it as a workflow comment. So on that requisition, the reviewer could open the workflow comments, click through and open those workflow comments. But in this case, I've also had it sent as an email so we can review it in an HTML format. All right, it says workflow has been completed successfully. It's going to go off and send an email to me with all that information. But let's jump into the application and just verify that it did actually complete successfully. If we refresh, we see that it did update. It says vendor 1001 is selected. We have our selected unit price for total net amount. And we can look at the workflow history and see that the action is now completed. But let's jump to the email and see the email that was sent. This is one, actually, we're not going to wait for Outlook to actually deliver this. Let's look at one that was delivered yesterday that gives us some of that information. So this is one that I ran yesterday. We can look at this requisition approval. I asked it to format it as HTML. I let it do the design, make the design decisions as the model, but we see which one it selected. In yesterday's decision, it selected 1002 and used different reasoning based on a different comment that I added. And told me exactly why. It looked at the price difference. It looked at the on-time in full analysis using BPA, MCP server, the analytics MCP server doing that analysis and including that in the business process. Talked about risk mitigation, talked about total cost of ownership. This is the reasoning that it did on making its decision. And then making that, once it made that decision, was able to use MCP to update that record, complete the operation, performing operations in the application, and then sending it to the next human in the workflow for approval. So these are a few examples just highlighting the capabilities of the MCP server. This is just a small portion of the things that we're hoping that you will build in your applications. Let's close it out with just one final slide here. And then we should have a few minutes for Q&A. On this last slide, for more information, two places that you can go. In our public preview announcement that we have a blog post, aka.ms/ignite-mcp blog, where you can see some of the business information in that announcement on why we're doing what we're doing with Model Context Protocol. It was good information. And also in that blog post, as we were going through our private preview of this functionality, we had several partners and ISVs working alongside us that were able to develop agentic experiences using this capability. And those scenarios are all highlighted in that blog. So if you're looking for additional information on things that you can think about, go look at that blog post, see those additional scenarios, watch the videos. There's very good videos for each of them highlighting the capabilities and things that are being done with MCP to give you additional ideas on things that you can do as you're building out your agentic experiences. If any of the partners that are involved in that are online with us today, thank you for your collaboration. Those were awesome experiences that really highlight well the capabilities of MCP. The next one is Dynamics FNO Copilot _MCP. This is our public documentation where you can find additional information on how to get it set up, how to enable it using feature management, and how to get started on your very first agent in Copilot Studio. So take a look at that. Look for additional information and details coming to that. We will continue to update that documentation as we go with more information. So with that, I will pause, and we have 2 minutes left. Alejandra, do we have any Q&A in the chat that we want to answer, or should we do that offline? I'll turn it back to you to look for Q&A.
We have answered most of the questions. There are a couple of them.
Perfect.
We can start. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, if we've already answered most of the questions, we are pretty much right on time. I will look through the questions afterwards as well, but it looks like Ajay and team have been keeping up with questions as we go, but we will, please stay tuned. This is a strategic investment that will continue to grow and expand as we work towards general availability and beyond to continue to strengthen the integrations between agentic frameworks and the Dynamics 365 ERP applications. So continue to work with us, start building it today, and let us know your feedback. And we'll work alongside you and enabling you to build your agentic experiences for your environments. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for the conversation, the participation, and we will talk to you next time.